everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of No Bullshit Talks. I'm pleased to be joined here today by Dr. Anissa Reilly, who is a mother, author, principal, and talk show host, right? Welcome.
Thank you. And I say hello to you and all of your audience out there in No BS land.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm so excited about our chat today because I feel like you work some magic in your job. You do some fantastic things, but also it seems like it could be quite stressful and maybe even dark at times to have to do what you do. So we're going to jump right in and do you want to explain to the audience what exactly is it that you do on a daily basis?
So on a daily basis, I am a principal of an elementary school in New York City. Yay, yay, yay. And the school that I'm in is in the poorest congressional district in our nation in the United States, right? It's the poorest congressional district. So if anyone understands what comes along with poverty and being poor, just multiply that probably by 10. And so we're dealing with all of those factors that deal with that. That come along with that, as well as gang activity and a feeling of being destitute. And so when you are in a community and you are pouring into the babies of the community, because there is a saying that if you want to change a nation, reach the children, right? When you are doing those kinds of things, there will be forces and mindsets and theologies that have benefited off of the poor characteristics that will fight against you for trying to do good. And so that's what happened as have been a principal, but I'm here and doing the work that I call, and I know others call, God's work.
I think it's so interesting when I hear about the sort of, differences between stuff in the US and stuff in the UK, and obviously there's so many similarities between our countries, but so many huge differences. And you talk about the gang violence, and we do have gangs over in London, but it's not the same. It's nowhere near the same extent. And we have knife crime, which is pretty bad, and don't get me wrong, it definitely needs to be sorted out, but again, not on the same level as the US. And obviously we hear stories all the way over here, and it's like there are kids going into schools and shooting up other kids, and I just cannot even imagine what it's like over there as a parent to send their children to school every day and the fear that this may happen, or as another child. And we luckily don't have guns over here, but it must be so incredible, like what goes through these children's minds, that they feel that is what they need to do to either survive or react and deal with their problems. And it must be so scary. And like you said, being in the district that you're in, you must see this sort of behavior, not necessarily shootings per se, but just bad behavior and, like I said, gangs more prevalent than in kind of the inner city schools. Like how much of that do you see, and why does it happen?
So fortunately for us as a school and our city, we haven't been victims of mass shooting. So, I'm just blessed and fortunate that we are not part of that story. The story that I can say that we are a part of is, our students walking home and have to make sure that they are safe as they are passing gangs going to and from school, right? So those kinds of things. So I know a lot of my colleagues have created like safe corridor passages, meaning that there are staff members and community members who have volunteered their time to stand outside as students are walking to and from school to ensure that they are safe and feel comfortable amongst what others are deciding to do, meaning those gangs. I happen to be what I would describe as a donut hole because I'm in the middle. My school is in the middle of 3 rival gangs. But
man.
one of the good things I'm going to say is that I've been the principal for almost 17 years now. And so I have a long-standing reputation in the community. And unfortunately, some of the students that I known since I was 5, they were 5 years old, have succumbed and agreed to be part of gangs. So between my long-standing position in the community and me being the principal of some of them when they were 5 years old, I have great relationships. So I'm able to negotiate. I'm able to garner that their respect. I'm able to leverage that relationship so that way our time of school is safe. They protect us. They make sure that we're good in the mind of what gang mindset is about. Once you build relationships, that's what leverage. That's you can leverage that. You know, some of them are extremely hurting. I know some of my children who are now in gangs, I can understand because of their home life. Some of them believe it's their only choice. I can't speak for our entire nation. I could just speak for the population of students that I've been fortunate enough to serve, in the community that I've been fortunate enough to serve in. And with that, it takes some courage to have to be in a situation where you know that your decision is going to ultimately change lives. And you can only do that if you know for sure that this is your calling versus you trying to get the position through a promotion or you see it as the next step in your career.
Yeah, I mean, you've said a lot of stuff there, and it's like it's kind of crazy. Now I'm just trying to digest it all because it's like so many great points in that. But I'm just sitting here thinking how you said the word blessed earlier. I feel super blessed being in the UK, like not having to suffer with gun violence or gangs like this. Like I've never actually really experienced any of that stuff. I know that gangs obviously do exist in the UK, but I've not had any experience with it, so I feel completely blessed. And it's like a different world, like, you know. And yeah, exactly, just super thankful every day, I guess, like hearing these stories in the news and knowing that I don't have to go through that because there are so many people out there suffering. And I think that people don't realize how lucky they are sometimes. Loads of people sit here complaining about their life and, you know, like you were saying about poverty and not having this and that because I don't have the latest PlayStation or whatever. But, you know, think about what you could be going through, having to literally risk your life every single day. You look at that person on the street that they walk past the wrong way slightly and they think they've got beef, and it turns into a fatal, you know, thing. And it's just so scary to know that that is, you know, you're one look away from something bad happening. So like I said, I feel super grateful listening to all of that. But I want to talk about what else you do, because you help, you know, you also help other women go through to deal with their stresses, right? You basically, you know, turn their pain into power. And you know, and I think I'm right in saying that because that's what, you know, you would describe it as. And you've obviously been through a lot yourself, which is what spurred you to do this. So I'd love to kind of talk through that and how you kind of got into doing that, and you know what made you start it and what exactly you do for these women.
So I'm on this mission to touch at least 1 million women's lives that have had a trauma, and let them understand that they don't have to be stuck in their trauma, that they can leverage their trauma for triumph. And that has become a passion of mine because, as you have already shared, I've been through a lot of trauma. And when I sit down and give people like a little glimpse of the traumatic experiences that I have been unfortunately part of, people are like, what? They can't believe it. And oftentimes the statistics for individuals who have been a part of the traumas that I've experienced have either succumbed to drugs, have either been committed to a mental institution, have either unfortunately committed suicide, or are they looking very like they've been through what they call 40 miles of bad road. They're like 40 miles of bad road, right? But fortunately, that hasn't been my story. So because of that, I realized that it had to be for a reason why that this part of my life has shaped me and molded me to who I am today. And the one thing that I can do with it is, one, not give the power back to my perpetrators, but to now use it as a stepping stone for others. So I can tell you don't step there, don't do that. This is, if you are on that step, this is what you do to get out. I have the t-shirt, you don't want it, so let me show you what you need to do, right? And what I found is that it has not only aided me in my healing journey, but it has assisted so many others.
That's so beautiful. And you said 1 million women. That's not a small goal. That is incredible. And I mean, I can understand that it also has helped you as well. So because, talking through your experiences with them to kind of motivate them, and let them know what you went through, it must be kind of therapeutic yourself to kind of do that. But it can't be easy, because talking about these really, and we're talking about real serious stuff, it's like PTSD or like sexual abuse and all that kind of stuff. These are really heavy, serious topics. Like it cannot be easy to talk about this. So how do you get women to even open up about this sort of stuff?
So as you said, it's from sexual abuse, rape, molestation. I have unfortunately been a statistic around trying to commit suicide, those kinds of things. So because I am not someone who has read the book and say, oh, this is what the book says, this is what the text say, because I'm someone who has actually lived through the experience, when I share it with the particular women, and sometimes there are men too, we are able to connect on that level of not just sympathy and empathy, but true connection, because the experience is the same.
Mm-hmm.
So when I share, oh, I know what this feels like, remember when you think like this, and they're like, oh yeah, that resonates with them. So then they're able to feel comfortable. And because I'm able to say, look at me, this is what I did. It's not easy, but it is possible. And so it has truly assisted me, because they say when you give, not only are you helping others, but you're really helping yourself too. When you give, you feel a sense of satisfaction and joy when you give. So that same type of principle applies around this sharing as well.
You made a good point there. Lots of people pretend that they're this selfless people, that they're giving back all the time, and I was like, no, giving back feels great as well. That's why people do it. There is a selfish reason. Like, you donate money to charity, you volunteer to do something. It makes you feel good. Obviously, that is true. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're still doing a good thing. It doesn't take away anything from what you're doing. But just be honest. Like, it feels good to give back to people. It feels good to help other people. And there are still lots of people who don't even do that. And so still, it doesn't. As I said, like, it's still a good thing you're doing it, but let's be honest, it does feel good, which I'm glad you said. But I want to say, like, I guess when you're talking about it, I feel like there were so many people out there were therapists, there were like professionals who could help people through this, but you're right, it's so much deeper than just being empathetic, because people can be empathetic in certain situations, but they don't truly know how it feels. They cannot even begin to understand how it feels. Like I said, they can empathize and they could be there for you, but there is something so different from someone who actually experienced what you've been through. And I feel that, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, because obviously you've been doing this and this is what the mantra that you've been kind of, going by. But I feel like when it comes to like trauma counseling or any of that sort of stuff, there really should be someone there who has been through the same experience as the person who's kind of looking for help. Because no matter how good you are trained as a therapist, like you said, there is that deeper connection. And that's why I guess people have like AA meetings and then those sort of things, because they're all kind of going through it together. They all understand what it feels like, to do that. And I just think, I don't know, because obviously that's what you've been going by. Do you think there's something to that no matter how good a therapist you are, you're never going to be able to truly understand what someone's going through unless you've done it yourself?
Yes. So let me say, like, I believe in therapy. I think people should go get therapy, because they are trained experts. Like, you go to a medical doctor, you don't want to look on the web to get your medical advice, right? You can get some information, but you can't get your medical advice from the web, right? So the same thing with the therapist. I believe in therapy. Unfortunately for me, therapy didn't work for me. Therapy wasn't my answer because of what you said. Like, I went to about 3 or 4 different therapists, and I was just like, Nah, you don't get it. Like, nah, we're not connecting. Did learn some things, but I just knew that that wasn't for me. But I know many people who have went to therapy and it was for them. So part of my learning style is really reading books. Like I learn and I read, and it just something happens to me when I'm reading. So that's what I did. I read a lot of self-help books around my particular traumas. And in that, I was able to connect with individuals who had experienced the same type of traumas that I experienced, right? And so, to your point, although I wasn't physically with them, just by reading their books and reading their stories, I was connected to them and I could understand that they really went through it, because there are only things and nuances that you will know about if you have been a victim or you have been in the moment. Like the lottery, you got to be in it to win it. So the same thing with the trauma, you got to be in it to know it. And so when you're reading books from people who are sharing their stories, sharing their experiences, and then add on the research, it helps to connect it and bring it home for you as an individual. So that's my long answer to, yeah, there's something to there's something to it. So having the sponsor, like an AA has a sponsor, you should have a trauma sponsor.
Yeah, that's what I
Maybe we
mean,
should start
right?
that. Maybe we
You
should
should
start that.
totally start that. That should be a thing, and I actually totally think so. Like, because I think, as I said, like you said, therapy is great. Therapy, and I want to kind of, I guess, work out why the UK is so anti-therapy. Like in the US, it's just normal, right? The UK
Yeah.
just doesn't. It's such a stigma to it, which is bizarre. But
Mhm.
I just think that any situation, if they've been through it, they will understand so much more. And the person who's opening up is more likely to open up because they understand them. It's the same with anything. If you have a connection, it's going to be so much more meaningful and you get so much more out of it. So totally start a trauma sponsor thing. That sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
Said it today on the show. That's our intellectual property.
Yes, coined here.
Yeah.
I think so. But those books sound great as well. I'm definitely a reader. I'm definitely that sort of person too. What are some of the books that you've read that people might who be listening who kind of maybe relate to it? Or do you want to give some examples of things that actually like you read and you connected to that might be useful?
So one of the main readers that I read after, and people may be like, really, go watch the show, but no, Dr. Phil. So Dr. Phil has like a slew of self-help books, right? And I read a lot of his books. And then the book that I'm reading now, which I recommend to a lot of individuals, is called What Happened to You. And What Happened to You is a collaboration between Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Perry. And the premise of the book is that instead of asking people, what's wrong with you? You change it to what happened to you.
Mm.
And when you make that switch in the question, it begins to open up the possibilities of seeing the person through the eyes of the trauma that they have gone through, which will cause them to probably be snappy or curt or withdrawn or overly happy, right? And in the book, it's written in a style of an interview. So Oprah will share a story of from her past or a guest, and then that'll set the stage for her to begin to ask Dr. Perry some questions in which she answers it from a psychologist's point of view. And he talks about how trauma affects the brain and how trauma really, you can't reshape your brain, but in clinical terms, it reshapes your brain. It changes your neural pathways. It damages some of your schema. And what do you do with that? So when you understand that, then you can do some things to counteract it. And then my most favorite person of all, because I'm into brain science, is Dr. Caroline Leaf. And Dr. Caroline Leaf talks about traumatic brain injuries and how trauma is a traumatic brain injury. And what do you do to strengthen your brain or awaken other parts of your brain to compensate for what the trauma has done?
Oh, those are excellent recommendations because I think there's going to be lots of people out there as well who perhaps aren't ready to talk to someone about it yet, or maybe they're going through something but they're not sure if they're going through it, and or what they're going through, and they want to understand a little bit more. And I think those books might provide some insight on that. And I think, that's also another question I wanted to ask, because there must be a lot of women out there, as you said, men as well. Obviously, don't get me wrong, it's just obviously you work mainly with women. There must be a lot of people out there who are suffering from a trauma of some kind. They may have PTSD, but they may not realize they have PTSD. And they may be, like you said, all those things earlier, you said withdrawn, or, they may be just acting differently, even, being strange to their loved ones. They may be scared of intimacy. They may be, like I said, bad mood or irritable. And they just don't know why. They probably just think they're in a bad mood, but they're actually suffering. Like, I would love to kind of get some insight from you, to maybe help some of these people probably notice a change in their behavior, and they're not sure, like, how do people recognize the signs that they're maybe going through this trauma or suffering from PTSD or something, like, and what can they do about it?
Glad you said that, because oftentimes PTSD is really talked about when we talk about military individuals.
Yeah.
Right? That's where we most commonly hear that term.
Hmm.
But PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So it's after a trauma. So it's just not something that happened into the military, or something, or like these big traumas, like a car accident,
Hmm.
or, death or something like that. But as we talked about, rape is a traumatic experience. Sexual
Oh,
molestation
yeah.
is a traumatic experience. It changes who you are physically, and psychologically wise. Your brain gets reshaped, as I was already shared. So with that being said, one of the things that I realized in my life is that my relationships prior to my husband just were all ending in a, bad space. And yes, I began to, you know, point outwards and say, oh, it was the guys, it was him, it wasn't this, it wasn't the right time. And yes, all of that could be true on the surface. And I'll use an example of a tree. When you look at a tree, you're like, oh, the tree looks beautiful, but there's a couple of rotten fruit on the tree. Let me just pick those rotten fruit. You can prune it, but if you don't deal with the roots, then the tree will not produce good fruit on anything. You can keep pruning, you can keep picking the bad fruit, but if you don't deal with the roots, then you're never going to get a tree that's going to produce 100% good fruit. So that same analogy is how I can describe what I began to do with myself, and looking at me being in this relationship. So I say that to everyone else. If you see yourself not having good fruit in all areas of your life, but the story seems to be repeating itself, but with a different face, or with a different job, or with a different relationship, then begin to look at the root of the issue and take a step back and analyze yourself, and be honest with yourself that maybe there's something that's going on deep, much deeper, because roots are deep, than what is on the surface. But that can only happen if you are really willing to do the work.
And that's it. And I think that a lot of people are not good at self-reflection. They find it really hard to take a look at themselves. And and also it's not nice to criticize yourself, and be like, actually I am flawed in this way and this way. And it's really hard to do that. So I guess that, and also people are in denial. If they go through a trauma, a lot of people use denial to kind of get over it, right? So they might be like, oh, everything's fine. And like you said, you blame everyone else around you. And it takes a lot before, people can actually realize it's something to do with them. I guess another way maybe is that if you've got a friend who you recognize that those symptoms in, and maybe you could bring it up, like what other symptoms are there? So say if someone's out there, who's got a friend who went through some trauma and maybe thinks they're still suffering and wants to be able to help them, but they're not ready to kind of do that self-reflection, what could friends do to help, perhaps?
So those are touchy situations, right? Because it depends on how deep the trauma is, and if the person is even recognizing that they're in a traumatic,
Mm.
right? So if you're the friend, you have to be very wise about how you're going to engage your loved one. We see those shows, interventions, like on TV shows, they have
Oh,
like these
yeah.
interventions And they're like, oh my gosh, but that's because it probably got to this place where it was critical. So we don't want to get to that place, right?
Hmm.
So I would say I would like watch a TV show with your friend. And if a person isn't traumatic, what do you think about that? Just so you can begin to hear what the person is thinking, right? So if there's a particular character who experienced a particular traumatic experience, talk about it with your friend and see how they are reacting to it and responding to it. I remember one time I was in a bookstore with my husband, and this is before he kind of really knew about a lot of the traumas that I went through. And we were talking about a celebrity who had shared her traumatic experience. And he was like, wow, I didn't know anything about that. And I was like, yeah. And I brushed it off and I kept walking. And he said that signaled him that, oh my gosh, this might have been something that you experienced too, just by that. And so he said he kept it, as a warning light, and he would find different ways to kind of help me open up. So I say to a loved one, to a friend, begin to be very careful, walk on eggshells, be wise about how you begin those conversations. But if you are in a place where you can have open communication, then I would say make sure you get some language that therapists use to help you navigate the conversation,
Mm.
because there are words that could be trigger words
Mm.
to the person who is suffering from the trauma that will put them deeper into it or
Back in the
close them
shell.
off. Yeah, or
Yeah.
close them off anymore. So be very wise. That's the main thing I can tell you.
And that's why trained therapists are the best people to go to, because they
Yes,
know what they're doing with this. And like you said, one
yes,
word could just change everything and they're in their shell, gone for good. So that's exactly
yes,
why you use trained therapists.
yes.
But I guess, like, I think, listening to all this is, it's quite, obviously it's quite difficult hearing all this. And what do people do then? What would you recommend? Because obviously you deal with this on a daily, like, well, on a daily basis, but you deal with this as something you do. How can these women get help? These people who have suffered a trauma, what sort of things do you do for them, and what sort of things do you recommend that they do to try and get over it?
The main thing I do is listen without judgment, right? And you have to be prepared for whatever it is that they're going to tell you. So if you have established that relationship with the individual, you're going to have to be prepared for whatever they tell you, and you cannot be shocked. You cannot portray that you are shocked, because then they will know right then and there. You can't handle it. You can't handle the weight
Mm,
of what I'm about to tell you,
mm,
right? You can't handle the weight of everything that I've been carrying over the
mm,
years, right? And so you have to be ready yourself. So as an individual who is ready to do the healing and to ready to do the work, be very particular about who you are going to engage in conversation with, because the minute that you engage in conversation with someone who can't hold the weight of your trauma, it will just reinforce in your brain that you can't trust anyone, that you have to go through this by yourself.
mm,
Now, if you've already been in that experience where you have shared it and your trust has been betrayed, just know that it wasn't the right person and you didn't know any better, right? But if you are truly committed to healing and living your best life, and as you heard us say at the top of it, you turning your pain into power, then I just strongly advise that you be very careful about who it is. You can test it, give them a little bit of weight. How do they handle that weight? But for the most part, go with people who already have been through it and are ready to walk that walk with you, because you're going to need it.
yeah, I totally hear what you're saying, because like you said, if you've already tried it before and people have dismissed it, or they've thought it was too much, and then you're going to handle it negatively already, and that's exactly what you don't need. So, and I can imagine that, like, there's situations it's already hard opening up, but having someone react, saying either thinking that you're overreacting or you
Mhm.
attract drama, so there's something wrong
Yeah.
with you. Oh,
Mhm.
those are such damaging things, and they have no idea how long that stuff stays with someone as well. So it's just like, but that's it. Like, so these things, like you said, these traumas, they are actual traumas. Like, sexual assault, like you said, all of these things, like, that we have, like, physical abuse, like, domestic violence, all that sort of stuff, they are difficult to talk about. And so many victims are just too scared to even talk about it. A lot of victims are too scared to come forward in the first place and report these sort of crimes because of their abusers. Their abusers may be someone of power in either their workplace or in the family, or, you know, in their industry of some kind. And there is a danger of coming forward. Obviously, we know about the big ones in the press, and we've heard all the stories there. And look, what, one or two people come forward and are brave enough, and then suddenly all these people find it in them. But what if you don't have that sort of thing in your industry or your family or something, and people or you've tried to report it, and people believe the abuser rather than yourself because of their stature or whatever? Like, this is why people have this fear, and victims keep it to themselves all that time, making it way worse, having to deal with it. So what advice will you give to people who are in that situation, who are victims, but they've either tried reporting it and it's not worked, or, you know, they're too scared to? Like, what advice would you give to those?
So I remember when I was in my domestic violence situation, and it was at the height of the situation. That's the best way I can describe it, where I went to an organization called Safe Horizon. Safe Horizon is for women, mostly women, but it's a domestic violence. And one of the things that I learned, which I offer to everyone, is that you have to have a plan. It just can't be, okay, today I'm going to get out of the situation. You must have a plan, because we don't know what the abuser is thinking about, and we don't know how far the abuser will go, right? To get what he or she wants. Unfortunately for me, fortunately for me, I didn't become a statistic, but we were trending towards him killing me. We were in a situation where I almost lost my life, but thanks be to God, I came out on the other side, which led me to Safe Horizon. And in the plan with Safe Horizon, because of how serious it was, they wanted to relocate me and my children, change my name, change everything, like basically a witness protection type of thing. And we went down the whole plan, the whole entire plan. And I had to make a decision at that moment. And they said, well, what do you want to do? Because this is what we're suggesting. And I just said no. Now, I'm not saying to do that if somebody is at that point in their life, but I knew deep in my core that that wasn't something that I could do. And that wasn't something that I was willing to do, to uproot my entire life because of one man's decisions. And so in that, they all right. They said, okay, just know that this is the possibility, but this is what you're going to do. And so before I even physically left, there were a series of things that I needed to do to get it in order. So when the day came for me to make the decision, I wouldn't have to worry about these other things. And so I say to people, you know, what the reason why sometimes you may fail, and this is just not necessarily with trauma, but with anything, is that you jump before you really have a plan. You haven't counted the cost. You really haven't probably analyzed all of the possibilities. You haven't outweighed the pros and the cons. You haven't figured out how to manage the cons, because that's what I needed to do. And then you needed to find somebody, as we already said, that will be there to support you no matter what. We like to say in the United States, ride or die. You need to find your ride or die, right?
That's that of Fast and Furious. I remember that.
Yeah, you need to find your ride or die and hold on to your ride or die, whether that ride or die is the agency, whether that ride or die is a friend, whether that ride or die is your therapist, whether that ride or die is simply your your intestinal fortitude. You know, whatever it is, hold on to it. And fortunately, I made the right decision for myself. And I'm here. But I don't recommend that for everyone. You have to have a resolve that no one can deter you from in order to take the steps that I take or make the decision that I made.
Yeah, exactly. But it sounds like, it sounds like you were in an awful situation, but you had that inner strength to get you through it. And you have kids involved as well, which gets even more complicated. But, you know, what if these people aren't that strong? What if they feel like they've got nothing left? Because that's what happens, right? When victims feel they've got no one to turn to, like no one's listening, no one's believing their story, and they don't feel they've got the inner strength to go on. They don't feel they've got any outside support. That's when these suicide attempts
Yeah.
happen, because they feel there was no other option and they cannot keep living with this horrible, feeling inside. And say, take, rape victims, it's that they, even though they're a victim, they've done nothing wrong, they feel like they're dirty, they feel like they've done something wrong, they deserved it, that they were asking for it somehow, that they should have fought them off, and there's always like internal blame on the victim when they are completely innocent in all of this. And it just tears people up if they don't have someone they can confide in, or they don't, have someone who actually is just going to listen to them and respect them and be like, no, you did nothing wrong, like, because they're consistently blaming themselves, and that eats away. And that's how suicide attempts happens, or at least like big bouts of depression and stuff like that. And that's my fear, is that there are so many people out there suffering alone, and they don't have the inner strength that you did to kind of fight through this. And you've turned, like you said, pain into power. You've turned this into a whole thing, and now not only have you helped yourself, you're helping hundreds of other women out there. I don't think most women are strong as you could to do that, so what can those people do who are sitting there, right at the edge, who want someone to listen to them and be like, look, this is what happened, it really did happen, like, I need you to believe me, like, what can they do?
The first thing I say is, if they're listening to this podcast, that's your first step, right?
Yeah.
Because we're bringing it to the forefront, we're shining light on it. And one thing I do know is, when you shine light on shame, it can no longer hide in the darkness, right? It can no longer hide in the darkness. And then I will share a story of, I don't know, most people know Walt Disney's story and how Walt Disney became Walt Disney. Walt Disney went to 300 banks to get his idea and concept of Disney World finance. 300 banks. 300 banks told him no, right? What type of belief in this idea of Disney World could Walt Disney have had for him to not stop after bank 1, bank 5,
Yeah.
bank 100, bank 199, bank 300? Now, if he wasn't so committed to this belief of Disney World, then he would have never went to bank 301, and we would have not known Disney what it is today. The reason why I'm using that story is because if you truly want to get better, then there is someone out there. You just have to find them. So keep going. But I also want to say, if you are at that point where you can't, please know that there is still hope. That means you're hopeless, right? Walt Disney was able to go to the next bank because he hoped that the next bank would give him a yes. He hoped that the 300 bank would give him a yes. He hoped that bank 301 would give him a yes. And bank 301 did give him a yes. So you have to hold on to hope, because it's only through hope that you'll get to person 301. But it's only through your desire to want to get better, because crying at night when the doors are closed and you're all by yourself is not a happy place to be. And your destiny is at stake. The children that you've never seen, your future generations' lives are at stake. And so if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your future generations. Do it for the individuals who are going to look back and say, look, Big Mama, look what Big Mama did. Big Mama faced this travesty, and Big Mama held on to hope and was able to change out the course of our generation, our history. We talk about generational curses a lot of times, we as women, and we say, oh, that's what happened to big grandma, mama. Now it's going to happen to me. Now it's going to happen to my children. It doesn't have to be. It can stop at you if you hold on to hope and continue to search out. There is a book. There is a podcast. There is a YouTube video. There is a person who will come to you. All you gotta do is take the first step and be committed to it. It may sound really simple. It may sound really easy, but trust me, it will happen. You just have to make sure that you don't give up hope.
That's so powerful. That's so powerful. I mean, you're right. It sounds so simple, but everyone knows that at that time when you're going through that, that's not simple. It's anything but simple. And with all those negative thoughts going through your head, you have to fight them, and that's not easy. And so you're right, though. And like, I feel like these days, what you just said, there are books, there are podcasts, there are YouTube videos. They didn't exist 20 years ago. Like, and look how lucky we are now that we have all these people out there who are giving advice and sharing their experiences, and obviously all the amazing people like yourself who are out there sharing their experiences and helping other people to know they're not alone, and to know that they are, like, you know, they've got someone who can support them, and like you said, have that connection who's actually been through that. Like, again, 20 years ago it was much more taboo. People wouldn't speak about this. Oh, you're a victim, oh god, damaged
Yep.
goods, you know, kind of thing. And it's changed the perception, thank goodness. Otherwise, you know, there'll be the suicide rates will be even worse, and depression rates and everything. So I'm obviously very thankful that there's that there is so much stuff out there. You're right. So that's amazing. But, you know, let's talk about the fact that you do consistently help people, you know, victims, all the time. Now, like you said, there's a lot, and you said that you need to people need to be prepared for whatever is coming out their mouth, and, you know, all the, like you said, some people have been building this up for years. They've been keep bottling it up inside for years. Most of the stuff you're listening to is really, really heavy. It's really difficult. Like, how do you cope? Because obviously you're burdening yourself. I don't want to use that word because obviously it's kind of,
Mhm.
you know, it's not right saying that's a burden. You're choosing to do this, you're helping people, but it's still a lot to carry yourself, all of these people's traumas that you are, you know, you're keeping inside. Like, it must be difficult for your mental health as well, because you're having to listen to this and you care about the people you're talking to. It's so easy to just think, oh my god, I need to help that person, I need to help that person, and you're kind of just then all the thoughts in your head of all these people's traumas. It must be so difficult. So what do? You must have to do something to look after your own mental health in this situation, because there is a risk that you're going to overburden yourself with all these things. So what do you do to look after yourself?
So I say there's like 3 roads that I travel when on this. The first road is the magic of television, right? And the reason why I say the magic of television is because we just don't get on set and sit in front of the camera and just start talking, right? So there's a lot of work that is done prior to me sitting down with my guests. So the guests are vetted, their stories are vetted. I do have people who interview prior to, I do have people who may have heard of someone who knows someone, and we work through their stories and vet their stories, and the stories are brought to me. So that vetting process, that pre-work that we do gives me opportunities to read the story and sit with it and pray about it, and really find out if this is something that I can do as an individual. So there is that time that I involve myself in prior to us getting on set. Like right before we getting on set, I do talk to the individual and I do say, is there anything that we can't talk about? These are the things that I would love for us to explore. Is this something that we can do? And the individual's like, I'm here and I'm an open book. So the minute that they tell me they're open book, I say, oh, great. And I tell them, if while we're speaking, if we're getting to that point, there is a safe word, right? And in the moment of us filming, I'm as authentic as I can be. And I'm as real as I can be. There are a couple of episodes that I have cried and we're crying together. There are some episodes that I had to stop and like tell the director, cut, let's take a moment, let's breathe.
Mm-hmm.
There are times where the guest has asked, can we take a moment? And then I say, do you want to continue? And there are times where my producer is like, nah, we need to stop right here and just take a minute. So there are all of those safeguards put into place. And then afterwards, my producer is always checking on me. You're good? You ready? You can go on. And always following up with the guests. So that's the first one. That's the magic of TV, right? And then there's the road of prayer. I am a woman of faith. And because I know this is soul work and because I know that it could be triggers for me, I am in constant prayer and I'm listening constantly to God to say if this is something that I could do. Am I at a healing place or healed place in this area that I can engage in conversation? And I may have thought that I'm healed in this area, but there are so many levels to particular traumas, right? There's so many levels. And what I found is that there are some times that I didn't even realize that this happened in the particular incident, because you go into survival mode and your brain does protect you from a lot of the stuff that you have gone through. And if in my prayer time, I get a check like this is not for now, then I know that that is something that I can't handle spiritually or my soul hasn't dealt with. And then the third road is my desire to help people, right? And so I'm very careful about that too. And so because I just want to help, because I know where I've been and I know what it can do to you, and I know how you can still be successful, because sometimes, even loving someone and not being loved back is trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rape, yes, we get. Sexual molestation, we get. But even loving someone, having a friendship that has been dissolved is trauma. Divorce is trauma,
Mm-hmm.
So because I know about all of this stuff, and because I know what it can do to you, and because the lights are being shined on the big things, it's those small foxes that destroy the vine, that I'm committed to making sure that those foxes are destroyed and not destroying these big vine or people's destiny. So those are the three roads in a nutshell.
Wow. Wow. I can't believe it all. There's a lot. There's so much that you go through. I can't believe that you do all of this on top of your, your day job, and at school in, like you said, like one of the roughest districts in the New York. I can't believe that this is on top of all that. Like the things that you have to do on a daily basis is crazy. Absolutely
Now,
crazy.
can I tell you that I actually believe it's purposeful, because it gives me a lot of, and I'm going to use this word very gingerly, practice, because my families that I serve experience the traumas on a daily basis. And so being able to be in community with them allows me to see it from different angles and see how they are resolved and the strategies that they've put into place. And I can offer some wisdom as well as glean wisdom, because they have been in generations in these situations and still are surviving, still wanting their children to do well. And so it has been research for me. I'll say it that way.
Yeah, I totally agree, and you're right. It's almost immersing yourself around that sort of community, so you know how to help others in that state. It's been such an emotional episode with so much in there, but I really want to end on a positive note. So I want to hear about a story of a woman, obviously no real names, who's come to you with a trauma and how you helped them and what they're doing now. I'd love to hear a positive story.
Yes. So on one of the episodes, I have a little young lady. She is 14 years old. So you can go on the season 2. And her older sister was a victim of a stray bullet. And she was on her way home from a party and victim of a stray bullet. Now, this was her big sister and really in love with her. And of course, for those of us who are younger siblings, your big sister is like, oh my gosh, right? But it was a very traumatic death. What she realized as she grew older is that how she needed to show up. And so we began talking about some of her dreams, her goals. Now, she was 14 at the time. Her dreams, her goals, at the time of the death, but when I spoke to her, her dreams and goals. So now she is currently producing her shows, her own shows. She is helping other siblings, because what she realized in her research is that when a child dies, the parents get notoriety, the lawyer gets notoriety, the perpetrator gets notoriety, but the siblings are left out of the equation. And she said, and people forget that we slept in the same room together and she's no longer there. People forget that she picked me up from school and she's no longer there. And so as everyone is attending to my parents, which they should, no one's attending to me. And so I'm filling that space for all of the siblings who have lost their older brothers or sisters or younger brothers or sisters to gun violence. And she's doing amazing work. And that all came out from us just talking about, so what can you do with this? So she's going to film school now so that she can produce documentaries about how to get it done.
That is amazing for so many reasons. That is a fantastic story to finish on. Not only like, okay, obviously sorry for her loss, but she literally, like you said, helped her turn her pain into power. And she's now empowering other children out there, and it's all just turned into this greater good, positive thing. And you're right, like, you know, parents do get all that, you know, recognition for it, and obviously the loss of a child is, I'm not a parent, so I can't understand, but I can appreciate the loss of the child must be one of the most difficult things anyone has to go through. But you're right, siblings also have that and people don't recognize it, and they are young, and how it could affect them could be huge. And it's amazing. I am going to grab those links off you. I'm going to share them in the show notes for other people to kind of check that out, because that's such an amazingly beautiful story to end on as well. And I just want to say thank you so much for being a guest today on a wonderful episode. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me here, and it's been a pleasure, and I hope we get to speak again.
Absolutely, I will definitely be in touch, and so will some of my audience, I am hoping. So what is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So the best way to get in touch with me is to go to my website, www.askdrreilly. Reilly is spelled REILLY.com. That's the best way to get in touch with me. But you can follow me on IG at Ask Dr. Reilly, Twitter, Ask Dr. Reilly, Facebook, Ask Dr. Reilly. I try to make it as simple as possible. Sometimes you do have to put a period after the doctor, but for the most part, it's just straight spelling like that. And to watch some of the amazing stories of my guests who have turned their pain into power, you just go to YouTube for Ask Dr. Reilly.
Perfect. That is consistent branding, I approve. So you know, it's really good. And I'm going to put those links in the show notes for anyone who just wants to have a click and go through it. But it's been fantastic today. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who's been listening. And I'll see you next week for another episode of No Bullshit Talks.